6:30 and Clare Wool's got to get on as quickly as possible. So my name is Joel Fitzgerald. I'm going to moderate the meeting tonight for the Ward 6 Neighborhood Planning Assembly. I'd like to welcome two new members, Caroline Hauser and Nelson Martell. This is their first meeting. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to start the meeting off with public forum. We have 10 minutes for public forum. Is there anybody that wants to speak in the public forum?
Gail, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, I am. Hi.
Hi.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So it's Gail Rose. I just wanted to comment on the no cause evictions topic that's on the agenda for later, just in case I have to hop off later. So the point of the no cause eviction rule is to protect tenants. Obviously, that's really important. But I just wanted to point out that a no cause eviction policy can have unintended consequences that haven't been thoroughly thought through, and which might dissuade good landlords from owning rental properties in Burlington. And I just want to be clear that I'm not talking about just cause eviction, which allows a landlord to remove a tenant for things like non-payment of rent and breach of a lease. But a no cause eviction is where a landlord doesn't renew a lease at the end of a lease term and doesn't give a reason. And there are many good reasons and examples of why landlords need this tool of no cause evictions. Just because a tenant pays rent and doesn't breach a lease doesn't mean that they should be allowed to rent indefinitely. So for example, landlords should have the right to place family members in their apartments. And personally, I rent out a house that I used to live in and I may want to live in again, or maybe my kids want to live there. And I should be allowed to, let the tenant's lease expire when that time comes. Also, sometimes landlords need to make renovations that can't be done unless the space is unoccupied. And there are circumstances where no cause evictions would allow landlords to protect other tenants when there are problem tenants. So, I could go on, but my point here is that landlords should be able to retain control over their own properties. And it's my view that a lease is a contract with an expiration date. And when the contract expires, the two parties are no longer obligated to each other. So thanks.
Thank you, Gail. Anybody else care to comment in the public forum? Mary, can you let me know when you feel comfortable? We can let Claire on if we feel confident that there's nobody else to speak in the public.
Sandy is raising her hand.
Oh, okay.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Hi, Sandy.
Hi, how's everybody doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. So this is Sandy Houston for Champlain College, from Champlain College, since I'm sort of a disembodied voice. And I did just want to let our neighbors know that we are going to be sharing some information on Front Porch Forum tomorrow. And the information is posted on our website as well about our plans for the end of semester and the next few months, and then the beginning of spring semester. So we are continuing to share information with our neighbors. We are going to be shifting to fully remote instruction after Thanksgiving and remain remote through the end of the semester, which is in alignment with current state guidance. So all of our main campus residential students will be departing on November 22nd, and then our residence halls will be closed. And then our spring semester classes begin virtually on January 25th. And they kick into in-person classes February 8th. So I'll have more details on the website. As I said, I don't want to take up a lot of time. But I did want to let neighbors know that was consistent with what we've shared in the past, but a little bit more information as our plans have evolved.
Well, thank you. That's very informative.
Sandy, do you mind if I ask a question about how things are going with your monitoring of students and everything?
Yes. So we have been very fortunate that the number of cases on our campus is quite low. The last time I looked at the dashboard, which I think was this morning, we had 5 cases to date, and none within the past couple of weeks. So we continue to test students and our employees weekly. We've found that our students are really, it's been an all team effort across campus, and our students, we've just been really proud with the way that they've taken on the responsibility of staying safe and healthy and following protocols, and just, caring for our on-campus community, but also our larger community surrounding us. Any specific questions, Matt, or?
No, that's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And that dashboard is available right off of our main homepage at champlain.edu.
I can only look at so many dashboards.
I know, I hear you. I hold my breath every time.
Okay, well, thank you. We have a couple more minutes. Anyone else care to chime in on the public forum?
I see we have Joan. I'm not sure if Joan is listening to us yet, but we were thinking about having some of the developers for the downtown project come in
There's Claire.
in December. I was wondering if you have, what do you think about that, Joan? Is that probably something that's okay to bring into an NPA at this point, or would you prefer people wait for that kind of thing, or what's your feeling about that? I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but if you say, hey, let's talk about it privately, that's fine.
I think it's fine for the NPA to bring people in. We are in litigation, so
Right.
that is to be kept in mind.
Sure.
But I think, yeah, the NPA is a separate entity from the city, was intended to be that way. So I think you should invite whomever you please.
Okay.
We thought, Joan, that maybe, it was because of the excitement that it would be really nice to get them on really quickly. Because, we think that everybody is kind of excited because of the project.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Okay, thanks so much.
you'll kind of hear, if you invite them, you will hear one side of things. So that's to be kept in mind.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's all I'll say on that.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So we have Clare Wool. Hi, Claire. Give us the Burlington School District update.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry I missed last month's meeting due to an extended meeting. And my apologies. We are very excited to be here, or myself and Jeff Wick, to give you a Ward 6 update. Knock on wood, we have opened up our schools as of September 9th. I think it was 8th or 9th. And for the last, we're entering our 3rd month of school. And things are going very well for the pre-K and K to 5 elementary schools, and our 6th to 9th grade middle schools. Just in the last 2 weeks, on October 12th, we went 4 days a week for our K to 2nd grade classes. And then just in the last week, on the 20th, we went 4 days a week with our 3rd to 5th grade classes. So all now K to 5 classes in the city are meeting 4 days a week in person with their teachers, with Wednesdays being a synchronized day for faculty and staff to get together. And so we're very happy with that success. On the other spectrum is we are very disappointed and concerned about our high school and our technical center. The good news about the technical center for those families that are familiar with it, we were able to relocate the technical center, all 228 students throughout the city to continue the Burlington Technical Center programming and those students from ascending schools. And we were able to accommodate that because the number is so low and we spread out those programs, those 12 different programs. And then also our alternative high school, we were able to find a home for at Rock Point. And our intensive special needs students, we were able to find locations here in the city. And the reason why I'm talking about it, if I haven't explained it, our high school was, we made the decision to close the high school due to air level qualities that were above the Vermont Department of Health's recommendation due to PCBs that were discovered when we completed our ESSA, our environmental state testing 1 and 2 that are required for the construction project, the size of the construction project that we are planning to do, or we're planning to do. And so it's a long story, and you know, in going backwards, we actually met with the governor today. A lot of our requests and conversations at the state level, the federal level, have been on hold and sort of pausing, I think, honestly, because of the election, and people were extremely busy and remote learning was just accepted, so that, you know, we had been challenged with how much do we disrupt and cause commotion, like as if this was a hurricane that hit the high school and we need FEMA funds, and that we were approaching this difficult situation on our own as a district, looking for alternative space to resume in-person learning as soon as possible. So we have an extensive list, and we feel poised to be able to get to in-person learning for our 970 students and 100 roughly faculty and staff at the beginning of this coming school year, new year, or January. But that has taken a tremendous amount of effort from us, which is great. But we have asked for help. We've asked for help from the University of Vermont. We've asked for help. Today was the first time we were able to actually have a meeting with the governor. We will have some decisions to make as a school board, what those alternative sites look like. And we had a survey that we sent out to families, hearing about their priorities of in-person learning, what was important to them as families and students. We have that information that we're going to talk about tonight at a board meeting that begins at 7. So many things to discuss with the community at large. But the good news is that we finally this week was an important week. So I was excited to be able to be on the NPA agenda, because we did speak to UVM and we finally spoke to the governor. And so that's good news. Yeah. And so we will be able to discuss that with the board tonight, and we will be able to also make hopefully some decisions next Monday at our normal monthly board meeting. We're just having a special one because as boards, you know, open meeting laws, we have to have meetings to discuss. And so that's what we've been doing, a lot of strategizing and organizing our thoughts of next steps.
Okay. Do we want to open for questions? Is there a line for questions? I mean, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Well, the first question is, you spoke of FEMA and funds, and I don't know if it was, in conversation, but it brings up a point. How does this affect the current school budget? I mean, the budget's all planned out and then you get hit with this hurricane. Now, does this come out of your general fund, or are we hoping for state aid or federal funds for two things? One, the repair, two, to move these students to satellite sites, because it's obviously going to cost some money.
Yes, so that is what we're working out now. We have isolated these costs, the preliminary costs that were being paid for out of the re-envisioning fund, the bond for the new high school. But now, given this, the severity of and the requirement of additional testing and a pilot testing to see the scope of this contamination, we know that the contamination at the tech center is great. And so we have to, as a city and a community, have those conversations of what it will take to bring that building back on, and then what we want to do as a city with our current situation once we find out more by March or April, once all the testing is done on the campus, to let us know. So it's really layers of next steps. So the first layer is identifying the testing that we've done. We've done subsequent testing the end of September 29th and 30th. We did testing again in October to see about the levels where we were trying to look and see if we could get into a building, of which we can use the cafeteria now, as well as the gym. We're looking for the auditorium potentially to use that core building, even if we have satellite space for winter sports and for necessary operational needs. And so the budget, where we'll fund it, we are looking to, similar to New Hampshire, we have reached out to the Vermont Environmental Consortium. We have reached out to the University of Iowa, who studies PCBs. We want to go after this chemical company, for these abatement and mitigation costs. We do not want them to come from educational program dollars. This chemical was, banned in 1979. And, we find ourselves in a predicament that, many federal, state, school buildings, this is a known contamination that if you're lucky, we just completed $7 million renovation on Edmonds campus. We did not run into this situation, this contamination there. So each building is unique, and they're the makeups of those building materials. So
we found them at Flynn. When we did Flynn, we found them at Flynn.
Yes, yeah, I had heard that. And we feel that through legislation similar to lead in drinking water that was recently passed, that buildings will need to get tested, and the funding for PCB testing and mitigation is another long conversation. But for the here and now, we are absorbing these costs. We are keeping a ledger. We will be able to show the governor these costs associated with this contamination and try and get federal funds with the support of Leahy and Sanders, because it was unbudgeted. And then the future, like I said, of the tech center, because its levels are so high, that will be another conversation. And we did ask, again today, without divulging too much, is that we don't want to pay for alternative space with our school budget. We want those dollars to go to educational purposes. And so we're looking for the state to help us in these alternative costs on the costs of finding an alternative space.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Nelson, do we see any hands? No.
Oh, I do.
All right.
Thanks, Nelson. Claire, thank you. Little did you know when you ran for school board that you'd also be real estate locator, developer extraordinaire. So thank you. I mean, really, I know you guys have been working so hard behind the scenes. So can you comment more on UVM, or is that an announcement in the future?
Yeah, they were, again, they are dealing with an active campus. They are going, I think, to help us out in a temporary capacity. So I don't, my dream was to take, a building or two offline and potentially have us be there. But knowing the information that was shared with us, which is very positive, the university has 11,000 students on campus, and knock on wood, they have been incredibly successful. They have tested every week for students. There were roughly 2,000 students that did not come back this semester due to COVID and remote. And now those students are coming back for spring semester. And so they are going to accommodate even more students because of the success of our state and the university in managing COVID and students feeling confident to come back to Burlington. So that then increases their need and their footprint to spread out 6 feet wide in all their buildings. And so capacity in the long run for helping us out just doesn't seem to be there, but in short-term capacity, hopefully we are going to make some arrangements during their break period to be able to utilize that. And so we're just in the beginning. Like, again, yesterday was the first time they were able to meet with us. We have been pursuing them since September. And I know they had an incredibly extensive list that we had to go through to be able to have those conversations of reality and logistics to make it happen. But we feel very fortunate with that, hopefully that it can work out.
Right, and even the half days, Wednesdays at Edmonds are such a fantastic.
Yeah, so that was proposed. That was just proposed last week. And I think
that.
we're going to revisit that based on potential conversations of which we are just literally today, yesterday, and tomorrow going to be having with the BHS faculty and staff and our community. And so we did propose that because, again, for those of you who don't know, because there's no school on Wednesdays, the BHS team had proposed that we use Edmonds campus because it can accommodate all of our students, and that we would go in on that asynchronous day and teach our Burlington High School students starting this month on Wednesdays. And so we are still we went out with it just to tell people, look, this is our plan. And we had heard from the community, just give us a day of in-person learning wherever, whenever our students are hurting. They've been out of school for 8 months.
Yeah.
So 14 to 18-year-olds have been navigating an incredibly challenging situation where remote learning for college-age students is one thing. Remote learning for 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds is not at all a positive, impactful way to learn as a high schooler. 50% of our population is at risk and free and reduced lunch. So those students are our greatest concern as well. Parents, we know, we're full-time, so learning math and science remotely is just not something that we want to continue anymore. That we have asked a lot of our families, and our students are at the high school level. And so, like I said, we do not sleep at night. We are focused on this, and we are committed to getting these students and freshmen who have never met their teachers. So that sense of community. So the whole child, the social emotional needs of our students are not being met. And so we recognize that, and we are in an emergency situation. We are working on this daily to figure this out.
So I just want to clarify. So is that not a certainty now, the half days at Wednesdays?
We put it out to the community on that. Right. Superintendent Flanagan did, but right now, because of our conversation with UVM, we will be updating the community shortly. So I would say right now we're holding on to that, but we hope for more rather than just that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wow, that's a lot. Wow.
You know what it is? I mean, I'll go deeper, but
Yeah,
here we are, a city that supports capital improvement for their public schools, of which we have 9 physical schools and 11 school programs, 2 alternative high school programs. The citizens of Burlington have been so supportive of our public school district in passing a capital improvement bond to fix, our aging schools, and also to get behind and shoulder the cost of a new high school. All of us in the last year have gone down to Montpelier to speak and testify on the importance of construction aid, which most, if not all, states have for public schools. They give 30 or 40% construction aid to your project. Vermont has had a moratorium for 10 years, and we understand, we live in Vermont because of its beauty, and we recognize that its low population creates a limited tax base. So we don't have the revenue that we could potentially put towards something like this, or have to put a moratorium on. So we know the cost of living, we know our taxes are high. But what happens is when your city then commits to improving the efficiencies, the ADA accessibility, we all know why we were all excited to have a high school, and then to be faced with, this situation and then be put on hold, all in the effort that if we hadn't had these dollars to do this work, to do this testing, we would be sitting in a school with these contamination levels, unbeknownst to us. And I think the call to action that's really intimidating. And that is something that as a state, we have to address. And I feel bad because students, faculty, past faculty, they all feel they're not very positive about having the time spent in that building. And we have to be able to share with them, as we did with the Department of Health, that PCBs are all around us and they're in our food, and we have that, we are now stuck with a situation that, we will get through this for sure. And we will determine where it's coming from. And the tech center, again, we can sort of put things together that were used in that building. I think from the initial conversations we're having, but, be proud of the fact that we on the road to improvement, this is our obstacle, but we will get through it. And the best part about getting through it is now knowing our situation. Even though it's unfortunate, I feel confident that we will get support some way, somehow from the government. And this is the beginning of, an awareness to, looking at our other schools and making sure that they're all safe. So.
yeah. Well, thank you, Claire, and thank the board for all the work that you're doing, and all the citizens of Burlington, like you say, for getting behind this whole effort, for the education of our children.
Yep, and I appreciate the parents like you, Mary, who are sticking with us, because we will get through this, and we will, get our students in person and learning. And, I just can't thank those families enough that have helped us and reached out in every capacity to help us deal with this very difficult situation. Yeah, thank you very much for all you guys do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, Joan.
This is Joan.
Yeah, we have.
Claire, I just want to really express my gratitude to you, because I can't even imagine sitting in your seat right now and dealing with all of this. And I am really, really glad that you're there, because your commitment and capability just can't be matched. And I'm also really sorry for the students like yours, Mary. This is just so rough on everybody. I have a question that's off the topic of the immediate emergency and a little more forward looking. And the answer may well be you haven't had the bandwidth, but it's an important issue that we kind of both took up, I don't know, a year ago with the school funding formula. And I wonder if there has been any, my understanding is that we are again hoping that that's brought up at the legislature. It makes a huge difference to Burlington's budget.
Yeah.
I haven't been hearing from our legislative delegation on this issue, and I'm wondering if you're hearing anything or if the school board has been able to have any focus on that.
Yes, so to give everybody perspective, the Agency of Education asked for a study, and it was done by Tammy Colby here in the University of Vermont, on the weight per pupil weighted, how we fund our school districts, and districts that require more support for students in need are not the same as a community that is better off with less needs. And so they really decided that it was really draconian how they were weighting the per pupil formula, and it hasn't been reviewed and looked at. And so we testified all last year as well to the Senate Ed Committee, and Philip Baruth, who leads that, heard us loud and clear on our needs. And Kendra Sowers, commissioner here on the school board, she's leading the charge with that committee, and sent an email out to all districts asking for their support in the review of this weighted per pupil, that it absolutely has to be updated to reflect 21st century learning costs per district. So we are on top of it. I'll connect you online with Kendra Sowers for this letter that we took the initiative to do. And then we do have to follow up with Philip Baruth, because we spent a lot of our time down in the State House talking about this and having formal presentations about this, and requesting a review and action. So we are on it.
We had asked for a report back from our legislators, and maybe we can coordinate so that
That would be great.
actually do hear back.
We greatly appreciate the city council's declaration on reviewing that. That was a huge support and a sound, sound sign from our city of collaboration and acknowledgement. So thank you for doing that and leading that initiative.
You're welcome.
And thanks for your kind words. I really feel lucky at the local level for everybody on this Zoom call when I look out and see all of you, and especially, during this incredibly challenging time, that you're my neighbors and citizens, and I'm not sounding sappy. We have to get through this together, and it is really important, the sense of community and level-headedness and honesty that goes into our work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Claire.
I'm gonna leave because we have this school board meeting.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah, a lot of work. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you. So next up, we have the legislature update with Barbara Rachelson, Chittenden 66, and I see your name. Barbara, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, great. I don't know if you can see me.
Not yet, Barbara.
No.
You cannot see me?
No.
Huh. Okay. I don't know how to make you, let me just see.
I think Barbara is under an attendee. Joel, if somebody could promote her to panelist, I think we'd be able to see her.
Help IT.
She's been promoted.
Now, there's bottom left hand.
Is the camera?
There's a camera at the bottom left hand. Matt helped me through it.
Hey,
There she is.
yes.
She's still muted though. She's muted.
Yeah, Matt, do you have any idea here?
If she can't unmute herself, sometimes it's the computer, and if you plug in headphones, she can make it work if she can hear us. I don't know if she can hear us.
Can she see us? We could go, we can't hear you.
I can hear her a
She's
little bit.
muted.
Hi.
There
we
we
go.
go.
Oh, good. Okay. It looks like I had a choice of being seen or being heard. So, um, um, so I was going to also comment on the school stuff, which I still can do. And I'm sorry, Claire jumped off, but I can catch up with her. So I'm Barbara Rachelson. I don't know who's out there, so I don't know who I'm talking to, but I represent part of the NPA 6 ward, and thank you for re-electing me this week. And it's nice that we got the vote count right away. So I didn't have a chance to talk to folks. I don't think I've been at an NPA meeting since the spring. And usually I come in before the election, but this is great timing because I know that we'll be starting on January 6th. We'll be getting a legislative all-day briefing on December 3rd, which will include a lot of information about the budget. You may have read that the Speaker of the House has a recount going on now. So depending on the outcome of that, we may very well be electing a new speaker at the beginning of the biennium. But I can say a little bit about some things that I know, and there's some question about if we'll be meeting remotely or not, but either way, we will be doing business. We have had the great honor and of having Joey Donovan and Mary Sullivan representing part of this district for many years. And my first term, I served with Joey as she chaired the Ed Committee. So she was really carrying the torch on a lot of the issues that Claire touched on. And I am happy to re-engage on those issues. I have since not served on the House Ed Committee. I've served House Judiciary. I don't know what my committee assignment will be, but it doesn't matter. I know that since March, we basically were doing work that had a clear path to being approved. One chamber had already approved it probably, and otherwise we were doing COVID relief and budgeting. But any work that Claire was referring to that's been done, we start at ground, the clock sets back. Everything goes back. Every bill that we introduced, it's wiped out. So we're starting again. And it's really important now that we're putting in bill requests and starting that work. So January 6th, we're out of the gate and ready to get action. We have 2 years to do that. There's going to be a new speaker, a new head of the Senate. And it's just going to be really key that we have our ducks in order. So I just want to make sure we're connecting, and I'll want to try to connect with Kendra too to make sure we're doing this work in the House and in the Senate. That will make it go quicker. I know we spent some time last session looking into lead in the water at schools, which was something that I don't know why we weren't looking at it earlier. Obviously, what happened in Flint, Michigan made a big difference in terms of raising people's awareness. And I also was involved in our committee with legislation related to PCBs contaminating the Bennington area. And the concern being that if we were just relying on the EPA website, we were really doing a disservice to people. Their bar was very low. And so we were working to hold companies responsible that did this damage. And that bill ended up getting vetoed, but it's a serious issue. I think just like the lead in the water, we need to be making sure that our public buildings, especially for children and youth and obviously the staff, are safe. So that's like not even negotiable. And we put so much money out to test and fix lead that I can't imagine we're gonna turn our heads on the PCB stuff. So I just wanted to put both of those issues out there. While the moratorium on construction has hurt, it also, I think, as we're trying to figure out why we have a gazillion school districts, and it's been better over the years with some mergers, for the dwindling number of students. And so it hurts Burlington and other districts that are growing, but we really need to look at Burlingtonians too, getting charged with many schools going in to do construction projects that may or may not make sense at this juncture. So I just want to present that side as well. In addition, so I wanted to get 3 things across tonight. One is just say hello again and meet people that I haven't met yet. Encourage people to reach out to me. I have spent a lot of time this summer helping people who are having either difficulties with their unemployment or other difficulties, either accessing some COVID relief programs or whatever. Like, one really great thing about being a legislator is we can help get people predicaments with the state moving quicker. And there's something that I find, like, why should somebody have to have a legislator call on their behalf to get something moving? But on the other hand, it's really important to know when people are experiencing these difficulties. And in addition to helping them, you know, we can look at the system-wide issues. And some of them have been related to DMV. I mean, they've been all over the map, but it's really just important that people feel comfortable reaching out. And I'm hoping people know about what the COVID relief programming has been. I'm happy to send a link with more of that information for folks. And then right now, I can start putting in bill requests. And again, I will talk to Claire and Philip and Kendra about the per pupil formula. But I'd love to hear from you all. I mean, I have my very long list of bills that I'm passionate about, but I want to make sure, especially since I wasn't able to go door to door, like, what are people, you know, feeling frustrated about? Or on the other hand, you know, you might have heard about a great idea in Colorado where your kid lives or something of a law that they're doing. So I really want to hear from all of you, whatever thoughts and ideas you have, and try to make coming to the NPA more of a regular event for me, especially since you're doing it on Zoom now, because it seemed like during session I would be in Montpelier, but this makes it like very easy. So I don't want this to be like a twice a year thing.
Great. We'd love to have you more. Do we see any questions?
Joan has had her hand up for a little bit.
So, Barbara, I'm a facilities director for a small school district in Bristol, and a lot of the things you spoke about are true. I mean, we are struggling on closing schools, and we're actually going in a different direction than Burlington is. You know, we're shrinking, they're growing, and it makes a lot of sense what you said, that, you know, with a moratorium on construction, it gives a lot of people to think about what projects, you know, are important and which ones are not important. And we actually are talking about that now. We have 5 schools. You know, do we do this project at this school if we're going to close it in 5 years? You know, and we have to leave it in good shape for the town, but how, you know, what kind of shape does that mean, and all that stuff. So there's a lot of conversations about those things, and I really like the fact that you brought that to the table, because, you know, people, our superintendent's curious of what we're doing here all the time, and so he's pretty excited I'm on the committee, because anytime we can get some information from Burlington, it's really helpful.
That's great. And I don't know if there's I used to actually work at the counseling service of Addison County. And so
Uh-huh.
I am really familiar with the school district that that you work for. I have been, and many people have heard me talk about this, I have been a fan of really looking at having one school district for the state. And I'm not trying to take away the type of role that I think people want to be doing when they are on a school board. But we really need all of those school districts, which cost a lot. And I know it's been a few years since I've been on the ed committee, but there used to be 50 schools in Vermont that had fewer than 90 kids in them. And but, you know, we had taken testimony from people where somebody was the only fourth grader in their school, for example. And I really think for the amount of money we pay per student, if we sort of created a system from scratch, we could put so much of that money towards the education, the teacher, the salaries. You know, we always hear about all the unions, and it's like, you know what? Nobody is talking about how much it costs to have the lawyers negotiate those contracts. You know, they're always sort of taking it out on the union. And Hawaii has one school district. They have way more students than we do. And as you know, they have the ocean between their islands. So we could certainly work it out with our mountains and roads. And I think really improve education.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot. I mean, our schools are half full.
Right. We're down to like 75,000 students, I think. And I will get that figured at the December briefing, but it's way down from the all-time high of 129,000.
Yeah. Do we see any hands up?
No,
I have a question.
No questions?
No, I have a
Matt,
question.
we have
Barbara.
Matt.
I was wondering, is there more to do with the decisions around retail sales of cannabis? Is that, what's going to be happening in the next session on that?
I'm not sure so much will happen in session. There's a board that will be set up and a bunch of different organizations, et cetera, working on it. But I don't think that will take much of our time. Towns have got to decide if they are willing to allow stores in their district or in their, yeah, I guess I'm going to use the word district for municipality. And so I think city council is going to be busier on it than we will be. I'm sure people will want to, I mean, it wouldn't even really start until like about a year out, I think. I've got to look back at so I'm not sure I don't think so.
Yeah, all right.
But if
And I
there are
just wanted to
concerns,
let you know, we've got around 16 people in the meeting. You're talking to a lot of people, and we've got at least 4 or 5 others on the YouTube channel. So it's pretty good.
oh, great.
Pretty good.
Say, you know, starting with the new session, what would the timeline be as far as Burlington actually receiving funds?
Right. Okay. So, and I know that you said that, no, you didn't say it. Claire said that there have been conversations with the secretary. So if there's already money in the secretary's budget, which I am not aware that there is, but
Okay.
let's say the secretary has some money, that could happen. We'll end up doing a budget adjustment in February, probably. So if money exists already, it could be coming to Burlington this year. If it's looking to have it appropriated, we're on a July 1 fiscal year. And so unless it were connected to COVID somehow, which I don't see how, but maybe we can give that more thought. It's possible there's money sooner. There's also other types of funds that the school can apply for. And I must say, I'm not familiar with what has been pursued. So there's CDBG money. Burlington is, the rest of the state goes through the State Department to get CDBG money. Burlington has its own CDBG pot of
Right.
money, which goes through CEDO. But also it's possible that through whatever sources the lead money went through, if, let's say, there's money sitting there that they tested all the schools, but they didn't need to do as much repair as they thought. It may be that some of that money can be repurposed. Again, if it's a new bill, and it requires money, it's going to end up waiting until FY, the next fiscal year to get that money. Unless there's some emergency situation, I'm just trying to think of what
Right.
that is.
Right.
And I would have to look into that. I can inquire, but I can't think offhand of, I don't know. I shouldn't say that because there have been other state facilities that have had other emergencies, right? We've had hurricane damage. So there are
Right.
ways that things can happen. And part of it probably means really working with the governor's office.
Well, great. Thank you. I'm a
No
parent of a high
problem.
schooler who's looking to go to school. You've never known
I
a 16-year-old boy who wants to go to school more.
You know what? I must say, I cannot imagine how hard it is for, I see my neighbors scrambling every day, which day is what, but I can't imagine how hard this must be. And
Yeah,
boy,
it's dire, I have to say. It's really,
right.
yeah. Just because it's not COVID, because they see every other kid in town going to a different high school. And those high
Right.
schools are proceeding, relatively normally, and they're all stuck in their own little world of their
I
house.
know.
So,
It's like such a bizarre, situation, but
Right.
as Claire said, I can't, what if we hadn't found out,
right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Oh, well, thanks for raising that, and I'll see what I can learn.
Wonderful.
Okay, thank you, Barbara.
Oh, thank you.
So moving along, next up, we have the Burlington Tenants Union with the topic of just cause evictions proposal, and it's Tom Proctor. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you so much for having me. And just to clarify, my group is Rights and Democracy, but I'm here tonight on behalf of Burlington Tenants Union, Rights and Democracy, CVOEO, and Legal Aid. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on to speak today. So a quick introduction of myself. Yeah, Tom Proctor, work for Rights and Democracy. For those who don't know about Rights and Democracy, we're a political nonprofit that's based in Burlington, but we operate across Vermont and New Hampshire. And we're a grassroots people-powered movement, and we look to push for bold progressive change on local and statewide levels. So I'm the political organizer for Chittenden County, and obviously Burlington is one of my biggest spots. I'm also a Burlington resident myself. I've lived in Ward 1 for the past 3 years, but I've been a resident of Burlington for the past 5. And I have been a tenant for pretty much the entire time of that. So a lot of what I'd say is going to be taken from personal experience, but also a lot of the work that has been done on this has been done by Legal Aid and CVOEO, who have really come and done a ton of research and brought a lot of really important facts to this issue. So first of all, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what just cause is and what the current tenancy model is in Burlington and Vermont in general. So in the state of Vermont, we currently can evict for one of 3 reasons: non-payment of rent, breach of lease, and for no cause. So this means the landlord of a property does not actually have to give a reason for an eviction and can evict a tenant, even if they have paid rent and been a complete model tenant and never breached lease, never done any material damage, they are legally allowed to evict for no cause. The majority of the time, this comes in the form of landlords deciding not to extend a lease, telling tenants that they're required to move out at the end of the current lease. The exact figures of how many people per year affected by this is unclear. While we know no cause counts for about 10% of eviction cases that reach the courts, this does not paint an accurate picture, as the vast majority of the time, when presented with an end of lease eviction, tenants will not contest it in order to avoid having an eviction on their record and leaving them with a blemish, preventing them from managing to find other housing, which, especially in Burlington, is you got no chance to find another apartment. I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. So just cause has many models depending on municipality. It is very much in place in a lot of different areas around the country. Essentially, though, it means tenants would be protected from being evicted for no reason, which provides security, stability for good tenants. Just cause does mean that tenants can still be evicted, but it would have to be for that, a just cause. What is it exactly? What is a just cause? It entirely depends on the landlord, and it entirely depends on the lease. Obviously, you could still get evicted for non-payment of rent. So that's never going to change. You're still going to get evicted for material breach. If you burn down the kitchen, you'll probably still get evicted, unfortunately. But you will also be able to get evicted for a breach of lease. So say you're a smoker and you smoke in the living room, the landlord finds out, that very well could be a breach of your lease. As a landlord is the party that draws up the lease, it would be up to the landlord to decide what would constitute an eviction threshold. And it would be up to the tenants to decide whether or not they wish to sign a lease based on the stipulations of the contract. So I want to talk a little bit now about the hidden damage of no cause eviction, because a lot of people hear no cause and like, well, you know, in a lot of ways it makes sense. You know, it's landlord's property. They can decide what they want to do with it and who gets to live there. But there is very much a hidden side, a dangerous side to no cause, and the things it can lead to and has led to in the research that's been conducted by Legal Aid. So as we probably you will all know, being a landlord puts an individual in an inherently powerful position. And with unfettered power to take shelter and housing from the tenants, it can lead to some landlords abusing this power. In Legal Aid's research and research from other housing groups from around the US who've studied no cause, they've noted that the ability to evict without cause has perpetuated discrimination and harassment against tenants, especially those from marginalized communities. With no cause, landlords have been known to evict after they found out the sexual preferences of their tenants. They've been known to evict after the tenants have got pregnant or adopted a child or have managed to get custody of their biological children. They have been known to evict because that child has developed behavioral problems like autism. They had been known to evict after tenants have got pregnant or become unemployed or even eligible for Section 8 vouchers. Some landlords even have evicted tenants after the tenants have fallen ill and become disabled. I think especially in this time of COVID, where if you do catch it, it can be absolutely devastating for months, maybe potentially years after, we don't know yet. This could really become a concern. There's another side to this coin as well, and that's landlords that use no cause as a cudgel and a tool to prevent tenants from reporting them for bad housing practices or harassment. Tenants fear eviction for many legitimate reasons. In Burlington, there are barely any affordable housing. In fact, there's barely any housing at all. As I've mentioned, we've got a vacancy rate right now of about 1.5%. And evictions can lead to huge uncertainty for tenants, lack of stability, increased anxiety, and it can lead to homelessness, loss of employment, being forced away from your family, and ultimately potentially suicide and depression. Often for many tenants, especially around here, it is easier not to mention that mold in the shower or the faulty railing or lack of heat in the winter. or even like harassment from your landlord, because the consequences of bringing up these legitimate grievances will ultimately result in a no-cause eviction at the end of your lease, and having to go through that cycle of trying to find housing again. And especially those on the lowest rung of the socioeconomic ladder, those from the most marginalized communities, feel these effects more, and it allows unscrupulous landlords to get away with some really horrendous housing practices.
So Tom, we have about 5 minutes left, and I've been running 5 minutes over. Can I take a quick poll to see if there's any questions? And if not, we can let you continue. But if there's some questions at this point, I'd really like to get them in. Is there any questions? Okay, I guess you're okay to continue.
I have a question.
Okay. Go ahead.
Neil Groberg, I wonder if, to your knowledge, the universities or Champlain are taking a position regarding the bill, since they have so many students who live off campus.
As for the universities, I don't know what their position on this is at the moment. I can tell you that there is a number of larger property companies that are taking a stance in favor of it. Northgate have been a recent one that have come out in favor, and the board has unanimously decided to back Just Cause. So there is larger housing groups that have come in favor of for this bill. But as it comes to the Champlain and UVM, I'm not sure yet. They are part. We have reached out to try and find what the position is.
You have reached out.
Yeah, recently reached out, so I'm still waiting on reply to that.
You could be waiting a long time unless you nudge them.
Well, if anyone knows anyone that if anyone could help us out with that, that would be really appreciated. I'm going to be trying to use my own channels, but I'll always take advice and help.
Well, I think Joan, who is supporting the bill and online, I think Joan is. She's not. Joan
Joan's pretty against it. Yeah.
Okay, never mind. If you want to contact me offline, you could just Google me. I can give you people who you can contact. And Sandy's staying pretty silent here, but maybe she has some comments about Champlain. But it's really more UVM that would be interesting to see if they have comments.
I'd really appreciate that, Neil. I'll get in touch. UVM, I'd certainly love to hear from them. I think students really are the ones that suffer a lot when it comes to this kind of housing practice. So thanks for your comment.
Thanks.
I'm happy to run through this a bit quicker. I understand that obviously I didn't realize how long this meeting already run for, so I'll try and get through the last part if that's okay.
Yeah, we were running a little over, but go ahead, continue.
Thanks. Yeah. So state law does prohibit landlords from retaliating against tenants who seek to enforce their rights, but in practice, it really does little to shield tenants. Protections are limited in scope and almost impossible for tenants to access in practice. In habitability cases, tenants have a rebuttal presumption that landlord's termination is retaliatory, but only if a state or local agency issues a report, and landlords also rarely discriminate in writing. Vermont Legal Aid's 2019 report, Eviction in Vermont, a closer look, reveals that 75% of eviction cases, the landlord is represented and the tenant is not. So often when this does get to court, the landlord does have all the power because, money-wise and just knowledge-wise, because it's their business, they carry all the cards. We got some recommendations for this Just Cause ordinance. This is already passed through charter change, so it's going back to the full council. But we wanted to cover as many landlords as possible. It defines Just Cause quite narrowly, limited to material breach of lease and non-payment of rent. In case of material breach, it requires landlords to give written notice of the breach, an opportunity to cure it. Requires landlords to inform the tenants about civil and legal rights, such as Legal Services Vermont and Vermont Legal Aid. It limits landlords' ability to mimic no fault, no cause eviction by raising the rent an unreasonable amount. Just kind of my last and part of my conclusion. Overall, we really do believe the measure will be good for tenants because it will redress some of the power balance, as well as provide stability, safety, and security to Burlington's most socioeconomically and marginalized people. It will be a boon for homeowners and taxpayers, as landlords will be more likely to stick to housing codes, meaning there'll be less strain on code enforcement and a crackdown on slumlords within Burlington, meaning nicer neighborhoods and happier neighbors. It will be beneficial to first-time homeowners and potential small-time local landlords, as we predict some larger landlords will sell off some housing stock as return on investment slightly narrows, thanks to the need to repair and bring up housing to code. It will help Burlington grow as more people will be able to stay in Burlington and put roots down here. And it will benefit the good landlords that treat the tenants with respect they deserve, as many already live within these rules self-imposed, such as Erhard Manke, who's a big advocate of this, and it will create a level playing field in the industry. And I would also like to note that since we kind of put this out, we've also said that we would also entertain an exemption for owner-occupied buildings. Which I think would be really important to kind of still preserve that small landlord bond, whereas while kind of putting the owners on the larger landlords. But yeah, sorry, that was a little bit long, but I'm happy to answer any questions and yeah.
Okay, well, I think we can squeak a couple more minutes if there's a question or two. Is there any, there's a lot of names on here and I didn't know if that meant a lot of questions. Okay, well.
I think Michelle just raised her hand.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you for your presentation. My question is, what are the opponents to the just cause evictions? What are their complaints in general, or what is the nature of their opposition to just cause?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. We have certainly had a fair amount of oppositions from landlords on this, and there's certainly a case to be said about there's a lot of landlords saying, you know, they're good landlords and they want to be able to do what they like with their property, and so by imposing just cause, it means that they don't have full control over their property anymore. So I think that's somewhat legitimate, but I think it doesn't really look at the balance between the power between landlords and tenants. There has been a issue when it comes to a lot of landlords are claiming that there's partly rent control. That, as I said, there's a provision that says in this ordinance that says landlords can't raise rents over a certain percentage, because what we were going to see is a major loophole that landlords would get rid of tenants by raising the rents an unreasonable amount. And then once they got rid of those tenants, they would basically put the rent back down to normal again. So we did have to put that provision in, but I believe it was 25% of the last year's rent. So we didn't consider that rent control ourselves because it was still a pretty hefty hike. So that's been another issue with landlords. And then landlords have also said, that if a tenant has been abusive themselves, they should have the right to be able to evict that tenant. But we've been saying you've fully within your right to evict that tenant, because that for us would be a breach of lease. So there's definitely been a lot of opposition and pushback on this, but we feel that some of the arguments have been a little bit spurious.
May I speak to Michelle's question?
Thank you.
Was that a yes, please?
I was just saying thank you for the response.
Okay. Yeah, Joan, go ahead quickly.
So what Tom said about the 25% rent increase is not true. That is not in the that's not in the charter change. It's unknown what the allowable rent increase would be. It's also not true that owner occupancy is excluded from this. In fact, I had offered an amendment that would have done that, but it was rejected in the charter change committee. And there's a list, this is not a comprehensive list, but some of the things that were raised and not answered prior to moving this forward is Do we have data indicating that no-cause evictions are a significant problem in Burlington? Is there a distinction between forced evictions and non-renewal of lease? Will this cause undue hardship for small landlords, possibly leading them to sell to large landlords? Some of the things that Tom said about large landlords selling, I don't know what that would be based on. We don't know if large landlords would want to get out of business. The people we're hearing from primarily are small landlords, actually. Will this prevent me from moving a family member into my apartment? The answer is yes. If I have a tenant who is harassing another tenant, but doing things that are hard to prove, or not illegal, such as displaying Confederate or Nazi symbols, hate speech, lewd comments in ways that are offensive or threatening to other tenants, will I be able to get them out? No. If I sell my duplex and the new owner wants to move in, can they give notice to the tenant and move in? No. What does a lease mean if not a limit on tenancy? Should a landlord be required to give a tenant a lifetime contract? Isn't that something to be negotiated between landlord and tenant? There is a long history of cities that have tried to construct lifelong obligations and rent control only to see properties suffer from poor maintenance and decreasing value. How will that outcome be avoided? Are there solutions that could accomplish the same goal? So I think you're kind of short on time, so I don't want to go through all of these, but they continue. And these are things that were raised by people in the Charter Change Committee and in just communications about concerns that were raised, and these concerns have not yet been addressed.
I can give 1 minute. I can give one.
Thank you. And just because I was wanting to clear up a few things, a couple of misconceptions and correct the record a little bit. I completely agree with Joan in terms of the kind of line that we're drawing in with owner-occupied buildings. That did not go up in charter change. That's something we want to address when it gets to the city council. It's something we've been discussing over just the past couple of days. So fair enough, you haven't heard that yet. This has kind of been a Ward 5 exclusive on that one. I just wanted to address another couple of issues that you did raise. When you said, what if your tenants are displaying hate speech, Confederate flags or whatnot? We'd consider that a breach of lease if it's in the lease that they can't do that. So that would be a lawful eviction. And at the end of the day, an eviction should have to go through court, and you have to prove that your tenants have done something wrong in order to be able to get rid of them. You did say small landlords have mostly been turning up to these meetings. I think that's because you decided to contact every small landlord in Burlington and get them all to come to charter change using city data, without doing the same for every tenant in Burlington, which we've already discussed, I think was a little bit unethical, and would like to see that redressed. And lastly, when it comes to lifetime contract, we've seen many other groups, big housing groups, that have got just cause already in their leases, like Northgate, and they do not have these issues that you're talking about. So there is obviously still a lot of debate to have on this, but it doesn't help when various accusations keep getting
I'm
tossed.
frozen.
But thank you so much for listening to my presentation tonight. I would love to sit down with anyone and talk about this in more detail. I do understand it's a really meaty topic, and it sometimes, this sort of conversation often takes more than 10 minutes, but if anyone would like to talk to me further on it, happily arrange a meeting. My email is tomp@radvt.org, and I'll stick that in the chat as well. And feel free to reach out, and I'll happily sit down for many an hour and talk about this.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom.
May I just speak to the ethical issue that Tom raised?
Panel, tell me what you think, panel. Matt?
Matt? Of course, Joan. Just go ahead. Of course, Joan, real quick.
Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead. Yeah.
So this issue had been brought forward at the CDNR committee through tenant advocacy groups. And at that committee, the committee chair was asked to contact landlords and said that he would through the code enforcement office, but then never did. And so when it came to the charter change committee, I did ask the code enforcement office to make the landlords aware because they weren't aware this conversation had been going on for many months. And obviously they are a stakeholder that is interested here. We don't have a database of tenants, but it was the tenant advocacy organizations that had been bringing this forward. We do have a database of landlords through our registration process. And so I asked that the charter change language be shared with the landlords, not just the small landlords, all the Burlington landlords, and let them know that we were discussing it in the charter change committee, which is the limit of what I did. And I don't believe that that's unethical. I think that we
Sorry,
should
Joan,
get
in CDNR, the head of the
stakeholder-
Vermont Landlords Association was invited to speak
sorry,
as a panelist.
You, Tom. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. And so we have to move on. Next up, we have Summer of Reckoning, Black Lives Matter, a photojournal of Battery Park Racial Justice Movement with Stephanie Seguino. Stephanie, thank you for being patient.
Thanks, no worries. You
And
forced
we'll
me to get out of another meeting and that was perfectly fine with me.
Okay.
I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll just calm things down with some nice pictures.
So first of all, thank you for inviting me. This work I'm going to show you is work actually I've done since George Floyd's murder, and includes really an effort to record for history what I think is a summer of reckoning in Vermont, but also nationwide. And so I'll be showing you some images also from Washington, DC, from the protests there as well. Whoops. So I'm sharing my screen. The first protest that I went to was early in the summer. It was in May, and you can see here at Battery Park. And I really invite you to get kind of the feel of these events. It was really this was an extraordinary first event. It was there were a lot of people there, and you can see here, this is the stage at Battery Park, that there was a huge turnout for this event. This is a moment of silence, actually several moments of silence that were requested in honor of George Floyd at this event. Perhaps you know what was most surprising in Burlington or revelatory was the composition of the crowd, and in particular was racially diverse, age diverse. I think that people who had been concerned about these issues were for the first time motivated to publicly speak out or show their concern about them. And so we saw a lot of people showing up that you might not have anticipated. This photograph in particular, continues to resonate with me, and I think it demonstrates both the grief and the fierceness that I see in particular amongst young people for dealing with the problem of racism that we're facing. This is behind the stage at Battery Park. You know, many of these events this summer, while being very serious and, you know, in many ways grief-stricken, they also were events in which there was, you know, moments of joy, if you will. And this parent and his child was standing on Battery Street and playing music to invite people who were going by to come join the event. You know, this image really struck me as well. And again, as I said, because this is the first time that in civil rights civil rights movement, especially when it relates to anti-Black racism, that so many white people have shown up. And that's what we see in the demonstrations in Burlington. There's a big issue in photography about whether one needs words to go along with photographs. And, so much of the photography that I did of the protests by default, because of the signage and what was on the signs, were really also about verbally expressing what was going on, not just sort of visually expressing. At all of these events, they were, for those who protested years ago, I think you'll find that in many ways they were familiar. There were medical tents at these events, there was food, there was newspapers, there were efforts to educate people about racial history. This is the next protest I went to. It was in Washington, D.C., and actually it was after Trump's event at Lafayette Square. And there were many different protests going on. I would follow different groups and photograph them. This man was at Lafayette Square and he climbed, as you can see, the traffic light. And he is referring to this sign is about his brother that was killed by the police in Las Vegas. And in some ways for me, this photograph also just tells us about both the heart-wrenching intensity of the issue of anti-Black police violence. This is at the end of the Black Lives Matter Plaza, which was renamed after during the protests. This was an ATM machine in DC. Many of the buildings were boarded up, and it was an intense period prior to when I arrived there. These are protesters that are protesting to the White House. So there's a fence there, and these protesters marched down to that fence protesting. I mentioned that there's a lot of joy in these events, and there was a group doing breakdancing there. And, in some ways it was a little bit controversial. Some people felt that, these events should be more serious, but I think they were also really an opportunity for people who were concerned about anti-Black police violence to find common ground and connection. And so these photographs were of a particular group that was engaged in music and dance. People were also, this is a historic moment. People were doing selfies. This is the White House in the back on the left.
Wow.
Many people, I passed so many families, especially Black families, that were there with their children. And I was listening to them talking about the history of civil rights in this country. And I was just deeply moved by what a moment it was for Black families to go to these protests and to bring their children and to educate their children about what was going on. And I will say that, they very willingly, I asked them if I could take their photograph. People were really, really welcoming being photographed in this environment because I think many of us realize that it's a historic period of time. This is a protest. I followed a group from Lafayette Square, and this group marched down to, you can see the Capitol building. This is Pennsylvania Avenue, and it is right in front of Trump Towers, the Trump Hotel. This woman, Trinidadian, had lived in the United States for many, many years. She was simply extraordinary. And I think, the experience of listening, especially to young Black folks, rally others, talk about their oppression, talk about the risks they were taking by being public, was really astounding. And it was really a lot of women who were leading these marches and protests. This is again, these are the officers that were in front of the Trump Hotel. I don't know why, but the guy in the middle looks a little bit like Jared Kushner to me. And this was right after that event as the group marched back to Lafayette Square. And in some ways, this too is really emblematic of the energy that I've seen both here in Vermont as well as all over the country of the protests that I've been to, of, you know, a fierceness and determination. This is in Lafayette Square, and the building on the right is where Trump had his episode, if you will, with the tear gas. When there was a wall of posters and signs that were that protesters had when they were looking at the White House, and so they had left all of their signs there, and all of them had been moved to Black Lives Matter Plaza around the corner. And so these are just some examples of them. The Smithsonian, as I understand it, is taking these and is actually is adopting these as historic memories of this particular moment. So these are recent artifacts that have now become history. I think for me, the saddest thing about this was not the names that I knew, but so many names that I did not know. It was heartbreaking. We're moving back to, we're moving back to Vermont, and this is the street painting in Jericho. The woman on the left just struck me as a salt of the earth Vermonter. And I think it speaks to me to the breadth to which the George Floyd murder really aroused sentiment amongst people who may not have been as conscious in the past. And everywhere that I saw this summer was the extraordinary private presence of young people, such as these two young girls at this event. And this is just the street painting after people left. This is Burlington street painting, and our counselor who advanced the resolution for the street painting here. This is an event in Bristol. So some young girls in Bristol also organized a protest or a rally. And, you know, for me, what struck me about this is, you know, it's hard enough to be a teenager, but to be brave enough in a small rural town to organize a Black Lives Matter protest, it just really speaks to, I think, the moral courage of young people that, you know, at least for me, really inspired me this summer. They set this up at the protest, and it was just such a gesture of compassion. And I wanted to include this photograph just to, you know, point out that it isn't just young people that are showing up, but everywhere also we are seeing older Vermonters also step up and recognize the role that they have to play in changing racial attitudes in Vermont. This is the Support the Police rally in Montpelier that many of you may have heard about. It was a very intense experience. I'm going to just show you a series of photographs of the people that organized the event. After I show you this one, Black Lives Matter folks came as a counter protest. And as you can see, they're all sort of merged here. And many of them were, you know, vying for attention, understandably. And I'll show you a few other photographs about how tense this event was, but also what I think are some constructive things that came out of it. So here are a few photographs of people that were part of the Support the Police contingent. I spent a lot of time talking to them. I felt like Switzerland going back and forth between the two groups. And yeah, it's a longer conversation about what those conversations were like. This is one of the examples of really, really harsh things, conversations that happen. Conversation might be a polite word here. At the same time, you know, I saw certain people. This is Trayvon Graves, and what I saw was also some people coming together to talk and maybe vigorously debate. But in many ways, I think that the conversations were really constructive. This is Trayvon with somebody from Support the Police. And, you know, this is another example of the conversations that were happening. And in many cases, they really were constructive conversations. And as hard as this event was, I think it speaks to the benefits of the protests that we've had, because it has pushed people to have these conversations that have not had them before. This was actually at a rally after this, the week after, the Black Perspective and Black Lives Matter organized a rally, because one of the women from the Support the Police contingent had made a comment that she didn't care about Black lives, with an expletive included in that sentence. And so they came back the next week. These are two people that were there, and part of the reason I'm showing this is because unexpected faces show up at this event, these events, in terms of people that support you that you might not think are anti-racist. And the event was extraordinary in the sense that the speakers in the event were all people of color, and at a certain point were all invited up onto the Capitol steps. And it's a good reminder for us that there are 30,000 people of color in Vermont. And maybe with the greatest benefit of this event was, but in general this summer, was people being able to recognize each other as being on the same path of fighting racism. But what was also so inspiring is that these Black events were all Black led. And, you know, in a society that diminishes and marginalizes voices of Black people, it was really quite extraordinary to see this. These are just a few other images before I get to some other protests in Burlington. There are just rallies all of the time this summer, as you well know. This is in front of St. Paul's Episcopal Church, and every Sunday, I think from 1 to 1:30, they would have people, folks from their congregation on Battery Street with these signs, and protest is probably the wrong word, but certainly supporting anti-racism. A number of things that the Black Perspective did this summer was to hold cultural events. And so this is one of those at Battery Park. This young woman is, you know, not only beautiful, but she's a high school student at Burlington and was reading her poetry for the first time in public. And it was really beautiful poetry, but most importantly was giving voice to the incredible talent and voice of people of color in our community that have not been given as much space to participate as should happen. This is an anti-ice rally that happened this summer. You couldn't tell from the Montpelier rallies, but the temperature was 95 degrees and just brutally hot. And in this particular day, it was a rainy day. And I think of the dedication of everybody who marched this summer and their willingness to go out in the heat, in the rain, in all kinds of weather. And to remember that so many people of color are marching for their lives. And I think this woman who's in the front of the photograph here with that look of deep thought, and I think in some ways grief, really to me exhibits the determination, if you will. This is still the anti-ice rally. I mentioned that there's been music in almost all of these events, and in the rain with plastic to cover their instruments. This is a subsequent rally in Burlington, so I have a series of images from that to show you. You know, as I look back at, like, I've taken thousands of photographs this summer, but for this one really continues to stay with me. And I think because of, you know, this forward motion and this energy and determination that was really the hallmark of the protest this summer. This is somebody from the sidelines who was photographing the event. There were a lot of folks, obviously, that were watching these protests and supporting from the sidelines. This is Rajni Edens. He was introduced as the people's poet. If you have not read his poem or his book, this particular poem that he has been reading this summer is called Their Names Are Mine. And, you know, he was in tears. And if you have not heard this poem, you might be too, were you to hear it. It was a really powerful, powerful moment and a powerful experience at every protest that he reads this poem. These are, this last set of photographs is from the protest that was organized in response to the 7 Days article called Battery Power. And so you probably all know that story, but people were taking copies of 7 Days and writing their reaction to the article on the newspapers. And then folks marched. By this time it was dark, and so the photographs were a little bit grainy, but folks marched from Battery Park up to Main Street. You might ask why one color photograph out of so many black and whites, and this was just one photograph that struck me that it worked better in color than in black and white, and so I left it that way. I just want to end with this photograph, which I've been driving all over Vermont this summer photographing as well, and seeing Black Lives Matter signs show up all over rural areas in Vermont, I think really speaks to the fact that there has been a racial awakening in white Vermont, in predominantly white Vermont, and the awareness and understanding that people have developed as a result of the extraordinary courage and skill of the protesters, and in particular the group, the Black Perspective, but a number of other groups, I think has really done a tremendous service to Vermont, and is, I think this will be a summer that is historic. So thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Welcome.
Amazing photograph she has.
Wow.
I'm happy to answer questions or take comments or move on, whatever you want to do.
Just wanted to say thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I got nothing.
For once, Joel is speechless. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, Stephanie, I never knew that you were a photographer. That's the quality of the pictures is just absolutely amazing.
Thank you. Thanks.
What do you use for a camera? Because my sister's a photographer. What do you use for a camera?
I use a Canon 5D. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
digital
amazing.
camera.
Wow. Wow.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll stop my video now.
Jeez, what a night. I apologize for going over as a moderator, but I thought it was some pretty good subject matter, and I tried to let it continue as long as I could, but you know, I was afraid about the time limits too, so I was trying to go in the middle there somewhere.
All good.
So, yeah, I guess this concludes the meeting, and we have to meet in 2 weeks. Is that what we do? Matt? And start all over again.
The citizens can, don't have to listen to that, but sure. Yes, we'll plan again in 2 weeks.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, for coming.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks a
thank
lot.
you.
It's really nice to
Thank
see
you.
everybody's faces when we're all panelists. It's just nice to see people who we don't get to see in person these days. And so thanks for coming and thanks for letting us see you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for a
all.
great program, steering committee. This was really, really good.
Yeah, thank you. Wow. Okay.